Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I am passionate about English football history, and will on this channel share stories from the past that I find interesting. Hopefully other will also find them interesting. In this first video, I want to give you a little glimpse of what it was like to be one of the ball boys on the line of the 1949 FA Cup final, between Wolverhampton Wanderers and Leicester City. The story is taken from the book, The Football Association Book for Boys, from 1950. I plan to upload videos regularly, covering a range of topics from the football of yesteryear. How would you like to take part in a cup final? Not just to watch the game, though that's something most boys would give a lot for, but to play an active part, and on top of that to get a perfect close-up view of the match. That's what I did on April 30th when I was one of 8 boys chosen from the whole of Middlesex to be a ball boy at Wembley. It sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? I'm captain of my school 11 and I knew my name had gone into the selectors along with hundreds of others. But I just didn't dare to hope I'd be chosen. Then one morning in the middle of class, algebra it was, of all things, the headmaster sent for me. For a minute I tried to remember if I'd done anything wrong lately. But I needn't have worried. The news was, I'd been chosen. I left the study walking on air. About a week later all the boys who'd been chosen were summoned to the headmaster's study. I already knew several of the others through having played against them in school matches. All were captains of their school teams and one was a schoolboy international. The headmaster had drawn a big sketch plan of Wembley Stadium on the blackboard. He told us the various positions we would occupy on the field. Then he gave a few hints. One thing was that when the ball came our way we must always throw it, never kick it. Every second, he said, counted in getting the ball back into play. It might even make all the difference to the result of the match. Think of the result of a cup final depending on you. Above all, the headmaster warned against making ourselves into referees. It wasn't for us to decide whether a corner was a corner or not. When we'd got our orders, we were allotted our places on the field. As I was one of the taller boys, I was given a position on the goal line, where I'd be able to deal with high balls. The smaller boys were given positions along the touchlines. I was rather glad about this, because it meant I'd get a good view of any goals scored my end. Back we went to class. But you won't be exactly surprised to hear that I didn't find it very easy to concentrate for the rest of that day, nor in fact for the rest of the week. I spent nearly all my spare time practicing throw-ins, and wondering a bit nervously what it would be like throwing in before 100,000 spectators. I had 1 or 2 nightmares in which I found myself throwing the ball in the wrong direction altogether, and waking up with a start. Thankful it was only a dream. The week passed somehow. I don't spend a lot of time over my football boots as a rule, but on the last evening I spent 3 whole hours polishing them, restudding them, whitening the laces, till they looked like a pair of boots in a shop window. Then I went to bed, setting my alarm clock for 6 in the morning. I was taking no chances. The moment my alarm went, I was out of bed, not a very usual thing for me, I can assure you. All of us were to meet at 11 o'clock at our school and then go on to the stadium together. And just before noon, we saw before us in the distance the big towers of the stadium with the Union Jack flying. It was a perfect football day, not too warm, with a nice breeze blowing. There weren't very many people about yet, at least not compared with what there would be later. But there was a steady stream of big cars and little cars, buses and charabancs, which poured in from all directions. Many folk came on foot and quite a few were dressed in fancy costumes. The Wolves supporters wore black and gold top hats, Leicester were in blue and white, all cheering and waving rattles. Quite a lot of the Leicester supporters had comical little policemen's helmets, done up in the Leicester colours. We went on into the stadium. It was a great experience to stand on the pitch, a huge spread of perfect green turf, surrounded by stands, empty and quiet as yet. We walked all round, looked at the royal box, and then visited the players' dressing rooms where we saw the 2 teams being massaged. Then we went to our own dressing room and changed into our match kit, grey jerseys with red and white ties, and grey shorts and socks. Time was getting on. Only half an hour to go. We could hear the crowd roaring community songs. Then the 2 captains went out to inspect the pitch. You can imagine how we felt, waiting down there in our dressing room for the big moment. None of us spoke much. At last the moment came. And out we went through a long tunnel, out into the sunlight, onto the great stadium pitch, with 100,000 people massed all round us. I'd appeared in front of crowds before, but never anything like this one. I felt dizzy and overwhelmed, and for a minute I hardly knew what I was doing. The two teams lined up and were presented to the Duke of Edinburgh and the Duke of Gloucester. They took their positions on the field. And we ballboys took up our positions, too. For the first half, I had been allotted the position behind the Leicester goal. A moment of suspense and the game began. It wasn't long before I was having quite a busy time of it behind the Leicester goal. The Wolves obviously intended to set the pace from the beginning. Very soon Bradley, the Leicester goalkeeper, had to dive at Dunn, the Wolves' inside left, to make a wonderful save. And not more than a minute afterwards, the Wolves were ahead. Scott, the Leicester left-back, misjudged the ball, and Hancox, the Wolves' right-winger, a small man but one of the fastest players in the game, saw his opportunity. In a split second he had placed the ball perfect centre, which Pye headed home with the Leicester defence quite out of the picture. It was the sort of goal you dream about, but don't often see. So the score was Wolves 1, Leicester 0. Leicester fought back, forcing the first corner of the match. But there was no doubt about it, Wolves had the extra speed and the extra class. I never thought you could learn so much about football in so short a time. To see Wolves' perfectly timed movements, centre forward to outside right to inside right, and so on up the field, was as good as a week's coaching. I expect all of us ballboys were thinking the same thing, would we ever learn to play football like that? Still, Wolves didn't have things all their own way. And if there was one player I admired, it was Bradley, the Leicester goalkeeper. 3 times in 3 minutes he made glorious saves from the Wolves forwards, Hancox, Mullen, and Pye. And once a terrific header from Hancock skimmed the bar and sailed right over my head. It was remarkable how Leicester stood the pressure. Another goal for Wolves seemed a certainty. And 3 minutes before half-time, it came. Wolves forced 2 corners on Hancock's wing. From the second, Billy Wright, the Wolves captain, lobbed the ball back into the Leicester goalmouth for Pye to head home. Half-time, and the Wolves 2 up. As the teams hurried off the field, Bradley asked me how I was enjoying the game. I told him he'd better pull his socks up, but I didn't quite catch his reply. For the second half I was behind the Wolves' goal. I was lucky, for as it happened I came in for a close-up of the most exciting part of the match. Leicester, knowing that they'd got to get a goal, came on in a fighting mood. They went right over to the attack and kept it up for 20 minutes of football that was one long thrill. And within 2 minutes, they got a goal. Adam, their outside left, dribbled splendidly for 40 yards, beating man after man of the Wolves' defence, to connect with Ken Chisholm, the inside left, just within the penalty area. Chisholm tried a shot, but Williams, the Wolves' goalkeeper, blocked it. The ball ran on to Griffiths, who shot straight for goal. What a moment! Springthorpe appeared on the Wolves' goal line, tried to head the ball away from goal, but failed. The ball was in the net. What a roar from the Leicester supporters up on the stands behind my back. It was all Leicester now. They seemed inspired. Attack followed attack on the Wolves' goal, from left and left again. Suddenly Chisholm had the ball and in a split second he shot home from an acute angle. The whole stadium seemed to go mad. And I was no exception. Then, cheers changed to groans. The referee had spoken. Offside. In my excitement, I almost forgot that the game was still going on. Plenty was happening, too. In fact, it was the turning point of the match. Smith, the Wolves' inside right, had seized on a weak clearance at the Leicester end. He got the ball at his feet. Alone and unaided, he swerved through the Leicester defence, beat 3 players in succession, and shot a wonderful left-foot drive home into the City net. It was the finest individual effort of the match, as fine a goal as I've ever seen in my short life, or ever expect to see. Wolves 3, Leicester 1. I think Leicester rather lost heart after that. They'd had their big chance, and luck was against them. Luck, and that bit of extra finish which gave Wolves their superiority in the game as a whole. I felt that the rest of the match was something of an anticlimax. Towards the end, both sides seemed to be tiring a bit, which wasn't surprising in such a grueling game. There were plenty of spasmodic attacks at both ends, several stoppages for injuries, and a lot of rather loose play in midfield which kept some of the other ballboys busy. But there were no more big thrills like the ones that had gone before. I think everyone realised that Wolves had won, yet Leicester didn't give up trying and I was kept fairly busy behind the Wolves' goal. Almost before I knew it, we were in the last minutes of the game. Then the final whistle went. The cup was Wolverhampton's, for the third time in their history. Billy Wright led the victorious team up to the royal box. Everyone stood up and craned forward to see Princess Elizabeth presenting the cup. She shook hands with the winners, the losers, the referee and the linesman. Then the teams came back on the field again, Wright holding up the cup and doing a dance of joy as he ran across to the tunnel that led to the dressing rooms. We ballboys followed, while the newsreel cameras whirred, and the vast crowds looked on. Back in the dressing rooms, we were shown the winners' and losers' medals. I managed to get all the players to autograph my program. The Football Association made us a present of our full kit. What did I think of it all when I was back home again and had time to think about it? Well, it'll certainly be a very long time before I forget any detail of that cup final. I think even in that one game I learned a lot about football, about the speed and skill of first-class players, their quick thinking, their sense of anticipation, and not least their great sportsmanship. It was an experience to remember all one's life. At any rate, I've been telling my pals about it ever since, and I am still not tired of it. So that was the story of a ballboy from the FA Cup final of 1949. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit the like button and the subscribe button to not miss the future snippets of history from the yesteryear.